Lake Lanier has a dark history, but even today, it remains one of the deadliest lakes in the United States. Some say it's haunted, and there have been many reports of the Lady of the Lake dragging people into the water. Why have hundreds of people met their end at Lake Lanier? And why is this happening today? Let's take a deep dive into the lake and see what lies underneath the surface.
Sometimes, though, the lake pulls you in and doesn't let you go.
When we're talking about Black history, we usually go back to at least a couple of decades. This time, though, we're touching on a topic still haunting the world today, Lake Lanier. On the 2nd of September, 2023, Gavir Alexander Whitlock, at the age of 23, died in the lake. According to official sources, Whitlock ran down some rocks and he slipped. This happened at around 10:30 p.m. on a Saturday. While it's not unheard of that people drown in the lakes, here's where things start to get interesting. Whitlock is the 8th person to die in Lake Lanier in 2023. From 1994 up to 2022, over 200 deaths have been recorded at Lake Lanier. When we rewind back to when the lake was initially created, this number increases to more than 500. Even though many have died there, Lake Lanier remains a popular location, attracting as many as 11 million people annually. Many people believe it's a haunted location, and that's due to the dark history that lies behind the lake. What was once a thriving small Black town became a river after the local citizens were forced out. Our story doesn't start with the drownings, but before this area became a lake, there was a town. Let's go back to the 1800s, to this Black town called Oscarville. It was estimated that Oscarville was home to over 1,000 Black people in the 1800s. The town was also a thriving community with blacksmiths, carpenters, and even farmers. The Black people who inhabited the area were also considered successful.
If you haven't heard of it, it's probably because it no longer exists. It's buried under Lake Lanier.
While Oscarville was only flooded in the 1950s, the brutality that white mobs placed on the Black people who lived here started much earlier. This brings us to the story of Rob Edwards. He was a Black man who was part of the community in Oscarville. In September 1912, things turned into a nightmare for Edwards. May Crow, a white female, 18 at the time, was assaulted in a forest that was relatively close to her home. When she was found, she had severe injuries, and Crow later died of the wounds she had sustained. Officials then arrested Edward, charging him with the assault on Crow. The strange thing, there was no witnesses who saw what happened, and the officials had absolutely no evidence to go on when they decided to charge Edwards and arrest him. Edwards was 24 when he got arrested, and he was sent to the local county jail. Falsely accusing Edwards and throwing him in jail was not enough for the people, though. Shortly after this happened, a white mob actually removed him from jail and assaulted Edwards. They used crowbars to beat him up, and then shot him multiple times. Edward didn't make it. To further add insult to injury, this white mob dragged his body into the local town square. It didn't stop there. Edwards was the first victim of this white mob. He had a family whom officials then targeted. This led to the arrest of Edwards' wife, who was known as Jane Daniel. Other people were arrested too, including the cousin of Daniel and his cousin. They even decided to arrest Ed Collins, who was the neighbor of the Edward family. Two of the individuals who they arrested were still teenagers at the time. Of course, it was a jury made up of only white people who convicted this group of people. And it all happened because the police decided that Rob Edwards was responsible for the death of a white girl. After being convicted, this group of Black people that they arrested spent some time in jail, but they were all later hung. During this event, when white people hung up these innocent Black individuals, there were an estimated 5,000 people who came to watch it. Multiple people lost their lives.
I never knew that every time we used our boat, we could be carrying invasive species to a new lake.
Multiple people lost their lives over something that they had no involvement in at the time. And we can agree that the reason for this was their skin color. Had Rob Edwards been a white person, would they have falsely accused him? And would things have worked out the same? Probably not. There was an aftermath that targeted the entire Oscarville. These killings of Edwards, his wife, and several other Black people happened between September and October 1912. After that, the white mobs decided to turn to Oscarville. They started to put buildings on fire throughout Oscarville, even targeting the Black churches that were part of this thriving town. As a result, it was not only the churches that were burned to the ground, but also many businesses that were owned by Black people. During this brutal movement by these white mobs, they also forced the Black people who lived in Oscarville to flee. Their goal was to rid the entire county of these people. By 1950, the United States government decided to put an end to the town that was called Oscarville. Even though the Black people who were residents were forced to leave, their legacy still remained alongside unmarked graves. Oscarville was flooded, and the local authorities decided to build a man-made lake. They left a lot of structures in place, and just decided to flood the environment. Fast forward to today, and we have urban legends that developed over the years. We don't have a clear view of what lies at the bottom of Lake Lanier. According to one diver, things might be terrifying down there. Buck Buchanan, a well-known diver in the United States, actually went to the depths of Lake Lanier. In 2017, he talked to local media outlets and mentioned feeling body parts in the water. Of course, at the depth divers tend to go, it's often difficult to see clearly. He did mention that it felt like body parts, and if he touched them again, they didn't move. While it has become a popular leisure site for millions of people, there have been a concerning number of deaths recorded at Lake Lanier. Explanations from officials remain similar, pointing towards drownings and boat accidents. Before we take a closer look at all of this, we should first consider some of these deaths, how they happened, and what officials, such as the Army Corps of Engineering, say about them. One of the most recent deaths happened on Saturday, the 2nd of September 2023. After slipping on a rock and falling into a river, it was announced that Gavir Alexander Whitlock died at 23. However, just a short period before this happened, a previous death was also recorded at Lake Lanier. On the 26th of August, the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office had a call regarding a drowning happening at Lake Lanier. This crew was dispatched to investigate. The call came in during the afternoon. Unfortunately, the crew wasn't in time, as the victim had already drowned upon their arrival. Since the victim didn't resurface, the crew went on to the body of water in a boat. By using sonar technology on the boat, they were able to identify the position of the victim's body, which was 10 feet under the surface of the water. It was later announced that the victim had indeed died. The victim was Edgar Stephen Cruz Martinez, age 23, and was reported to have gone for a swim in Lake Lanier.
Lake Lanier is a popular destination on these hot summer days, but it can also be dangerous. A 23-year-old man drowned while swimming in the lake this weekend. It's the third drowning there since July.
5 days before Martinez drowned, the death of Brian Terrasone was reported on the 21st of August. At 6:40 p.m., a call was made to the Hall County Fire Rescue Department regarding a potential drowning happening at Lake Lanier. The call had a response team go out to Van Pew Park. Terrasone was swimming with two friends at the park, but drowned as he made his way up to the shore. Using sonar technology, the responders were able to identify the location of Terrasone's body in Lake Lanier, and his death was officially confirmed at 8:30 p.m. the same evening. On the 29th of July, Leonardo Martinez went missing while swimming in Lake Lanier. He entered the lake from Van Pew Park. Game wardens were tasked with a search for his body, which took a couple of days. His body was found on the 3rd of August in the morning. The Georgia Department of Natural Resources reported that Martinez's body was discovered floating in the lake's surface. His body was about 30 yards away from the shoreline. On the same day, another report of a missing person was noted. This was Tracy Stewart, a 61-year-old from Stone Mountain, who was close to East Bank Park when he went missing. When Stewart swam in this area, he reportedly went underwater but didn't resurface. It took a few hours to search for Stewart's body, but the game wardens at Lake Lanier were able to find his body, which was roughly 46 feet from the surface. The previous event was reported on May 22nd when a 57-year-old man went missing at Lake Lanier. The man's name was Terry Daughtery, and one friend spoke out, reporting that he had seen him the previous night. Daughtery was with this friend of his at the marina. Yet when people woke up the following day, Daughtery was nowhere to be found. His body was later discovered close to the area where Daughtery was last seen, where his friend's boat was docked at the marina. 10 days before Daughtery's body was found, a man aged 78 drowned in Lake Lanier. Melvin Wernicke was last seen at the War Hill Park section of Lake Lanier. A drowning was reported to officials during the afternoon, to which they responded. Later, they were able to locate the position of Wernicke's body in the water. It was pulled out 20 feet underneath the surface. Another death, recorded in 2023, happened on the 25th of March. Timothy Klein Thomas went missing. Officials were able to find Thomas's body at the Boulding Mill Park section of Lake Lanier. Officials on the scene reported that Thomas's car was parked close to the boat ramp. His body was discovered close to the area where he parked his car. This marks 8 deaths in Lake Lanier in 2023 so far. An interesting factor that we should now take into consideration is that throughout the entire state of Georgia, a total of 39 drownings have been reported for 2023 thus far, and 8 of those happened in Lake Lanier, with the other more widely spread amongst the other lakes in Georgia. Sure, the number of drownings in Lake Lanier hasn't reached the double digit for the year, but it's still the most deaths recorded at the lake since 2019 and 2018. During both of these years, a total of 8 deaths were reported. One report did come in regarding a 24-year-old, Thomas Milner, who got electrocuted when he jumped into Lake Lanier, but limited data is available regarding this. So, now that we've covered the lives that Lake Lanier claimed in 2023, let's rewind the clock a bit and take a look down history lane as we explore deaths recorded in previous years too. Throughout 2022, a total of 6 deaths were recorded at Lake Lanier. Let's take a closer look at them. It started on the 29th of May, 2022, in the Margaritaville area. A 19-year-old known as Jose Camarillo decided to go for a swim with a couple of friends. Camarillo went under the water and his friends could not locate him. After authorities were called, Camarillo's body was found in the lake. He was declared dead when they retrieved his body. The next death happened at the 18th of June, 2022. Cayenne Ding decided to jump off a pontoon boat. The boat was rented at a local leisure facility. This happened at Holiday Marina, and the jump led to the death of Ding. He was 29 at the time of his death. A 61-year-old man also died in Lake Lanier. On the 23rd of June, 2022, officials released a report that stated the man, known as Rocky Hammond, drowned close to Longwood Park, which was located in Gainesville. Just one day later, on the 24th of June, another man drowned. This time, it happened in Forsyth County at the Vans Tavern Park. Even though the two areas are separate from each other, the lives of both men were claimed by Lake Lanier, which extends into multiple regions throughout Georgia. The lake claimed the life of Francis Scott at the age of 48 on the 2nd of July. He was confirmed dead when his body was pulled from the lake, close to the area of Little River. From this point onward, one more death was also recorded for 2022, which happened on the 28th of August. This time, Adelso Barrias became a victim of the lake's horrific past. At just 21 years old, she went to take a swim with her 2 friends in Lake Lanier. They decided to swim in the area of Old Federal Campground. It was reported that Barrias struggled and then went under, and she didn't resurface. Authorities later found her body, and she was confirmed dead.
On one hand, it's really tough. Anytime you have a situation like this, it's very difficult and challenging. On the other, you're very happy for the family because they've got closure. They have an opportunity now to put this behind them and hopefully get on with their life.
The figures don't get any better when we go back just one more year to 2021. The first report of the death at Lake Lanier came in April of 2021. Or, well, it started in April. Dorian Pinson, who was from Gainesville, went missing on the 18th of April, 2021. He was on the lake with a group of his friends. They rented a pontoon boat to spend some time on the lake and decided to head over to some of the deeper parts of Lake Lanier. 3 of them got into the water for a swim. Pinson was one of the 3 who decided to get into the water. A strong wind started to rise over Lake Lanier, which was strong enough to push the boat away from these 3. As the boat was pushed away, the 3 had to attempt to stay on top of the water. Fortunately, another boat nearby noticed what happened and closed in to save the 3, who were now struggling to stay on top. The boat was able to successfully get 2 of the 3 out by the time the boat arrived. Pinson had already become exhausted and couldn't remain on top of the water anymore. He went under the water, and this led to his drowning. Multiple crews then started to search for Pinson following this occurrence. The area where the 24-year-old male drowned was challenging to navigate, as it was at one of the deeper areas of Lake Lanier. The officials also noted a significant amount of timber at the bottom of this area. While many bodies are found merely hours after drowning in Lake Lanier, it wasn't the same for Pinson. It took authorities 3 months to find the location of his body. This was done thanks to the help of sonar technology. By the time his remains were discovered, he had already sunk 117 feet into the water. Bruce's Legacy, a nonprofit organization located in Wisconsin, actually helped to retrieve the remains that were still present in the water. This matter was investigated for some time. After they successfully retrieved the body from Lake Lanier, his remains were sent to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Further details about the investigation haven't been provided. Still, it does raise the question, if it was so obvious that this basketball player drowned, why go through so much trouble in investigating his death even further? Thus, while he drowned in April, it wasn't until July that they were able to pinpoint his location. This brings us to the 4th of July weekend back in 2021. In just one weekend, 2 deaths were recorded at Lake Lanier. But it wasn't just deaths. Just take a look at the statistics for the 4th of July weekend. Incidents were reported at many lakes, including Altoona, Blackshear, Clarks Hill, Jackson, Oconee, and Sinclair. Yet, when you really zoom in and look at these statistics, you'll notice something interesting. Did you see any deaths recorded at any of these lakes during those few days? No. The only area where deaths were indeed reported is at, you guessed it, Lake Lanier. Let's get into the stats. There were 9 reports of VUIs, which stands for boating under influence. Yes, it's similar to a DUI, just on a boat. And similarly, drinking alcohol or using drugs when you get on a boat can be incredibly dangerous. There was a total of 2 boating incidents and 1 injury report. When we look at deaths, though, we can see that 1 person drowned and 1 person was killed due to a boating accident. Before we continue to track back to the terrible deaths recorded at Lake Lanier, let's take a moment to consider something. The officials governing this body of water have provided statements regarding why there are so many deaths at the lake. They often turn to the fact that millions of people come to the lake every year, and with this amount of traffic, officials believe it explains why the lake has a much higher death count than others in the Georgia region. As we just noticed, several reports of BUIs were investigated by the officials in the area during the 4th of July weekend. This means there were people intoxicated and driving boats on the lake. Yet, when we take a look at accidents where alcohol was involved, no deaths were recorded. But at the same time, it's something that officials will often point out when there is something happening that seems unexplainable. Instead of diving into the lake and seeing what's going on, they point fingers at traffic and perhaps even drunk people who have a greater risk of dying. Now, we're not saying something is lurking in the lake. We're pointing out the fact that investigations are needed, but they don't seem to be something on the radar of the officials who are involved in protecting people who come to the lake. If you've been keeping up with the latest news from 2022, you might have also seen one famous individual speaking out about Lake Lanier and how deadly it is. The strategy that was referred to during this speech came from Usher, the famous rapper's ex-wife. In 2012, Usher's stepson went to the lake, and his intention for the day was to dive into the water. While he spent his time in the lake, a jet ski ran over him while his body was just below the water's surface. This led to severe injuries to Usher's stepson, and later, he died due to the injuries he sustained during the event. It was a devastating event, and on the 10th anniversary of her son's death, Usher's ex-wife decided to speak out about the horrors that have been happening at Lake Lanier for some time now. They also requested that the entire lake be drained and properly cleaned before it's refilled. Whether or not her request will be granted is something that we will have to wait and see. Due to the significant size of Lake Lanier, it is very unlikely that local authorities are going to grant this wish, except if an entire community could come together and take a stand against the high death rate at the lake. Following the events in 2012, Kyle Glover's mom, who was married to Usher, didn't leave it there. The fact that she spoke out on the 10th anniversary of her child's death wasn't the first move she made. Following the death of her child in 2012, she actually worked together with the parents of another child, who also met their end in the river the same year.
New a petition to drain Lake Lanier. Yeah, you heard it right. Already this year, there have been 9 boating incidents in the lake, and that includes 6 people hurt and another 3 who've drowned. The person behind the new effort is a grieving mother and the ex-wife of superstar singer Usher.
Through several efforts from these individuals, they were finally able to get local authorities to actually implement new laws in the local area. 2 new laws were passed as a response to the deaths that happened in Lake Lanier. The first one was the Kyle Glover Boat Education Law. This law focused specifically on providing more comprehensive safety education and information for people who are looking to take a boat out on the lake. It didn't just apply to boating on Lake Lanier, however. This program quickly became an essential education element in different areas of Georgia. The other one was called the Jake and Griffin Prince BUI Law. It was in response to 2 brothers being killed due to a boating incident on Lake Lanier. This happened shortly after Glover's death. A family decided to rent a pontoon boat to go onto the lake. Both Jake and Griffin Prince, brothers, who were on that boat with their family. The family had planned a relaxing day on the waters together, but didn't think things would end up as a tragedy by the end of the day.
July 1st, 2014, anyone born on or after January 1st, 1998 will be required to take a boating education course.
Another person, also out on the boat, actually bumped into the boat the Prince family was on. The accident led to the death of both boys. The offender was initially charged with a lawsuit for homicide by vessel. However, the final verdict did not find him guilty of this charge. Instead, he was found guilty of reckless operation, not reaching for help after hitting the pontoon boat, and driving a boat while under the influence. Additional provisions were also made. For example, anyone who is under 13 years of age and wants to go onto Lake Lanier was required to wear a life jacket after these laws were passed. Additionally, the laws ensured consequences could now be passed to anyone who had an alcohol level that surpassed 0.08 while operating a boat on the lake. Let's now turn our attention to boating incidents on Lake Lanier on an annual basis, and you'll start to see more evidence of just how deadly this lake really is. For this, we'll need to take a quick look at statistics, of course. Take a closer look at the 4 lines. Each color represents a different lake, but they are all part of Georgia. Pay close attention to the blue line. Yes, that's the one at the very top of the graph. Guess who that line represents? Of course, it's Lake Lanier. As you can see, in this time frame, the most boating incidents were reported in 2016 at Lake Lanier, but the stats still remain bad for the other years covered in this graph. Throughout the years, many people have died there. However, a large number of publications tend to focus on the statistics between 1994 and 2022, which counts for over 200 people who have died in less than 3 decades. One thing you might come across when doing some research about Lake Lanier is this common question that continues to linger. What was the deadliest day at Lake Lanier? This question is often fueled by something that happened quite a long time ago, but it's an event that will continue to leave a scar throughout history and in the future. So, what happened that created the deadliest day at Lake Lanier? Well, to answer that, we'll have to go way back to 1964. In fact, let's be more specific, Christmas Day. Now, if you remember, this was only about a decade after Lake Lanier was initially created, after Oscarville was flooded out of history. On this particular day, a family was driving. There isn't much information regarding where they were headed, but given the time, they might have been headed to family for Christmas. However, as the family drove over the bridge across Lake Lanier, the driver lost control of the vehicle. The car then ran off the bridge and flipped over on the way down before finally landing into the water. There were no survivors. The horrible thing that made this such a tragedy was that there were 2 adults in the car, along with 5 children. 7 people lost their lives that day. One thing that we haven't touched upon yet is the mysterious lady of the lake. As with any site like Lake Lanier, urban legends and folktales will always develop over time. Many know about the horrific history that lies beneath Lake Lanier, a town of black people harassed and forced to leave, and a thriving black town flooded to create the lake. While there are a couple of different urban legends that have been passed on about Lake Lanier, one that seems to stick is the Lady of the Lake. Some people claim that they have seen a woman at the lake with a blue dress. She seems restless, like she is lost, and she would only appear at night. When we take a look at the potential origins of this woman, or ghost, as people have called her, we have to go even further back to 1958. This story is about 2 ladies who were driving a Ford sedan, quite similar to the family of 7 that landed in the body of water. The Ford sedan also tumbled off the bridge that the 2 women were crossing. The sedan landed in Lake Lanier, and both died as a result. There was a lot of controversy surrounding this urban legend that is now associated with the lake. However, it's known that the incident did happen. 2 women were confirmed to have drowned after their vehicle went into the river. They were known as Delamay Parker Young and Susie Roberts. According to some sources, Susie Roberts wore a blue dress when she was in the car, which corresponds with the many sightings that have been reported of this ghostly figure. This is also where things get a bit creepy. You see, the reports about sightings didn't only mention a woman wearing a blue dress. It also mentioned that the women had lost both of their hands. That's not the most frightening part. Following the event where Susie Roberts, along with Delamay Parker Young, had lost their lives in Lake Lanier, the car was later found. Yet, it took the officials at Lake Lanier 31 years to find the car, which had submerged into the lake's deep waters. This wasn't the only thing they found, however. In addition to the car that went off the bridge and into the water, officials also discovered a body. While it wasn't confirmed that the body belonged to Susie Roberts, it did correspond to 2 things that people have noted about the sightings surrounding the Lady of Lake Lanier. First, the body was wearing a blue dress. If that's not enough, the body also had both hands missing, which is just as people have reported. Coincidence? Maybe. But to me, it seems like these events are connected. Of course, this is for everyone to decide for themselves. Some would continue to believe that there is a Lady of Lake Lanier haunting the area. Some people will continue to believe that the lake is haunted, and it is now taking revenge on those who decide to get into the water because of what happened to the people who once inhabited Oscarville.
Many believe Lake Lanier is haunted because of the high number of drownings. We spoke to officials who tell us.
What we do know is that many people have lost their lives at the lake, and we also learn about the evil history that lies beneath it, spanning to times before this lake came into existence. In the 1800s, a small thriving community created a home for themselves in what was known as Oscarville. After an innocent black man was falsely accused of assaulting a white teenager, things quickly became a living nightmare for the entire town. It wasn't enough for the white mobs to brutally murder him. No, they also had to do the same to his family. And shortly after, white mobs burnt down what these black people worked hard for, essentially chasing them out of their town. A few decades later, that very town was flooded to create Lake Lanier, and some think that they didn't remove all of the unmarked graves. Fast forward to today, and the lake has claimed about 500 lives, and the number keeps growing. Is it haunted? Is there really a Lady of the Lake dragging people into the water? Or are all of these mere coincidences, and people are actually dying due to drowning and boat accidents, as the officials claim? While we can't give a definite answer to that question, we can agree on one thing. America is constantly trying to hide the vicious history of how white people treated black people, from outright murder to getting an entire town of black people. We must tell the story and ensure it doesn't get hidden in history. What are your thoughts? Have you heard the many deaths linked to Lake Lanier? Let us know in the comments. If you want to learn some more black history than ever taught you in school, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel to help our movement get pushed to more people. We're not just telling stories, we're changing lives and waking the culture up.